In the fall of 1994, three middle school children, Hannah Griggs, Leon Wynn, and Benji Krell, vanished during a school field trip to the abandoned Wister Asylum in rural Oregon. No bodies were found. No signs of struggle. The official story said the children wandered off during the tour and were likely lost to the forest. The search was extensive. Over 200 volunteers combed the woods for weeks. By winter, the case went cold. Now, 31 years later, a young woman walks barefoot out of the forest, wearing a faded yellow hoodie last seen on a missing child from that trip. She says her name is Hannah Griggs, and she hasn't aged a day. The morning air carried the smell of frost and pine sap, thick as syrup along Route 7, where the gray asphalt wound through the forest and disappeared into mist. It was the kind of Oregon morning that made every breath feel ancient, heavy with the memory of trees and water. Deputy Clara Mendez's cruiser was the only car in the lot outside Keene's General Store, the headlights still cutting through the lingering fog as she killed the engine. She was running on little sleep and less patience, and the only thing she cared about was the scalding coffee inside. She barely noticed the girl at first, a slender figure standing in the dew-wet grass at the edge of the tree line, just beyond the faded open sign. It was the bareness of her feet that made Clara look twice. Her skin, a shade too pale for someone who'd supposedly just wandered in from the world, was blotched with red from the cold. She wore a yellow hoodie, the fabric thin to translucence at the elbows, its hem frayed, almost chewed through in places. The girl didn't flinch or shy away when a pair of crows swooped overhead, cackling. Clara stepped out, boots crunching on gravel. "Hey," she called gently, trying not to startle her. "You lost?" The girl turned, slow and dreamlike, as if the motion required remembering how to move. Honey blonde hair hung in knots around her face, her eyes huge and sunken with sleeplessness. She stepped onto the road without looking for cars, the asphalt icy under her bare feet. "Is the bus coming?" she asked. Clara froze, heart stuttering. The voice was soft and unsure, and yet there was an odd confidence to it. A girl who had waited a long time and was used to waiting. Clara glanced down at the tattered hoodie and saw the name tag, its corners curled and letters faded to bluish gray. Hannah Room 3B, Miss Carey's class. Clara's mind stuttered. She'd grown up here, and Hannah Griggs was a name every local recognized. A face on old milk cartons, a story that haunted the county for decades. The girl looked exactly as she did in the news clippings from 1994. Not older, not a day changed. Clara's voice was almost a whisper. "Are you Hannah?" The girl nodded, shivering as the wind tugged her hair. "Yes. Is the bus coming soon?" Her words were simple, innocent, but edged with something sharper, like a knife dulled by use but still capable of cutting. Clara's hand hovered near her radio, but she didn't reach for it. "Do you know what day it is, Hannah?" The girl blinked. It was Thursday, the day of the field trip. She looked over Clara's shoulder, scanning the parking lot. "Where are the others?" Clara felt the world tilt. "What others?" Hannah's eyes grew glassy, wide. "Leon and Benji. We were waiting for Mr. Bell." Clara's throat closed. She tried to steady her voice, mind racing through half-remembered details from old reports. "Let's get you inside, sweetheart. It's too cold out here." The girl nodded obediently. She followed Clara into the store, leaving damp footprints on the linoleum. Every customer stopped to stare. The air in the shop grew thick, silence broken only by the slow drip of the coffee machine. The moment Clara called for backup, the story was out. Hannah Griggs had come home. Miles Heller's world had shrunk to the size of his cabin. On the edge of Kingston Hollow, it stood half-collapsed under the weight of moss and regret, creaking with every shift in the wind. Inside, the kitchen clock ticked a little too loud, as if it was measuring the years he'd spent alone. He had once been the kind of teacher kids remembered. Every corner store clerk in town still called him Mr. Heller. though none of his students had been in school for decades. In the years since he'd retired, the ache in his knees became a barometer for rain, and the ache in his chest became a barometer for memory. The phone startled him, jangling against the silence. He let it ring, staring at the steam rising from his chipped mug of black coffee. When he finally answered, Sheriff Levin's voice crackled over the line, full of static and sleep. "Miles, you sitting down?" "I'm always sitting these days," Miles answered, his voice thin. "There's a situation at the station, a girl. She says her name's Hannah Griggs." Miles's mug slipped from his hand and shattered on the counter. He barely noticed the burning in his palm as coffee pooled around his fingers. "That can't be," he croaked. Levin's voice softened, grave. "It's her. She hasn't changed, Miles, not since '94. She asked for you." Miles pressed his free hand to his forehead, eyes squeezed shut, and let memory surge up. The hallway at Crescent Hill, the field trip slip signed by Ms. Griggs in blue ink, Hannah's quiet smile in the classroom window as the bus pulled away. "She says I was with her," he managed. "She remembers you, Miles. Says you were there, the day it happened." A log cracked in the wood stove. Miles jumped, heart pounding, as if the sound were a gunshot. He hung up the phone and stumbled to his study, heart thrashing, the past pressing in. There, in the dim glow of an old lamp, he rummaged through battered boxes and opened a battered trunk. Lesson plans yellowed by time. Photos curled at the edges. A field trip permission slip. Hannah Griggs, October 28th, 1994. He dug out the yearbook, dust swirling in the shaft of light. There was his class. Ms. Carey's 3B, smiling faces, Leon's gap tooth, Benji's oversized sweater, Hannah holding a library book to her chest. His own photo was there too, in the corner of the chaperone group. Hair darker, eyes free of ghosts. A crooked smile. But something else gnawed at the edges of his memory. The bus, the field, the roll call. He could remember taking attendance. Hannah, Leon, Benji, and a fourth child, always in the background, never quite in focus. A boy with a red backpack. No name, no line on the permission slip. He'd always assumed it was a trick of memory, but now he wondered. Miles closed the yearbook and pressed it to his chest, wishing the pages could offer answers. He stared out the window, where the trees pressed close and the woods waited, patient and dark. He didn't know if he was ready to see Hannah Griggs again, but he had no choice. He went to the closet, pulled on a threadbare jacket, and stepped outside, the air sharp as glass. The woods stretched out before him, unchanged and unknowable, just as they'd been 31 years ago. He locked the door behind him, but the past came with him anyway. Inside the Kingston Hollow Sheriff's Station, everything felt too bright and too clean. White walls humming with fluorescent light, the floors scrubbed to hospital shine. But behind the glass in Interview Room C, the air felt dense, charged, almost buzzing with unsaid things. Hannah Griggs sat quietly at the end of the long steel table, legs dangling above the linoleum, socks stained brown with mud. She wore her yellow hoodie like armor, sleeves pulled down over her fists. The room's heater clanked and rattled, but Hannah didn't flinch at the sound. She just gazed at her reflection in the mirrored glass, her eyes searching, as if for someone else inside. On the far side of the table sat Dr. Priya Banerjee, a forensic psychologist flown in from Portland, her notepad filled with careful questions. Next to her were two agents from the FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team, one young and brisk, the other old enough to remember the original case. Sheriff Levin and Clara Mendez watched from the other side of the glass, tension in every line of their bodies. Miles Heller had arrived just minutes before, his face pale, jaw working as he fought to steady his breath. Dr. Banerjee spoke first, gentle and patient. "Hannah, do you know what year it is?" Hannah's gaze drifted to the ceiling, as if searching the paint for an answer. "It was 1994, she said finally, voice small but certain. "Then it was dark, and now it's... Now." The younger FBI agent leaned forward. "Can you tell us where you've been, Hannah? Did someone take you away from the group?" Hannah looked down at her hands. "No one took me. I heard the bell, then the stairs, then the hollow." She said it flatly, like reciting a list of chores. Dr. Banerjee scribbled a note. "What is the hollow, Hannah?" Hannah shrugged, still scratching at the inside of her wrist in slow, methodical circles. "It's not a place. It's a rule." The older agent tried a different tack. "Do you remember the other kids on the trip? Benji Krell, Leon Wynn?" Hannah's body tensed. Her lips thinned and her voice lost its melody. "Benji ran. The room changed. He didn't get out in time. And Leon." She went quiet, staring hard at the table's surface, knuckles pale. "He's still there," she whispered. "But not all of him." There was a long silence. From behind the glass, Clara whispered to the sheriff, "She really believes it's still 1994. This is impossible." Miles Heller leaned on the observation glass, voice shaking. "She's telling the truth. She's never lied. Not in my class. Not once." Dr. Banerjee closed her notebook and softened her tone. "Hannah, how did you get here? To the road where Clara found you." Hannah's eyes flickered. "I walked. I remembered the bell. I remembered to walk towards the light." A flicker of confusion crossed Dr. Banerjee's face. "What light, sweetheart?" Hannah stared at her, pupils so wide her irises vanished. "The hollow is dark, but you can always find the light if you remember your name. That's the rule." The younger agent pressed. "Did someone tell you that? Mr. Bell?" Hannah flinched, just a little, a muscle ticking in her jaw. "Mr. Bell says he only reminds. He doesn't teach." At the glass, Miles' breath fogged the window. He pressed his palm to the cold surface, as if trying to reach across decades. The interview wound down, the adults exchanging glances thick with doubt and awe. As Dr. Banerjee gathered her notes, she paused and offered Hannah a gentle smile. "Would you like to see Mr. Heller now?" Hannah's face lit with the faintest glimmer, a child's hope not quite killed by fear. She nodded. Minutes later, as the officers brought Miles into the room, Hannah looked up at him, her expression raw and searching. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then she whispered, "You're older." Miles' throat closed. "I am. You remember me?" Hannah nodded, her small fingers curling into the fabric of her hoodie. "You were the last one who saw me." He knelt so their faces were level. "I'm sorry, Hannah. I should have looked longer. I should have..." She reached out, surprising them both, and pressed her palm against the back of his hand. "It's not your fault," she said quietly, but her eyes flicked away, haunted. A moment later she asked, "Is the bus coming soon?" Miles blinked, fighting the sting in his eyes. "Not yet, Hannah, but we'll wait together." Sheriff Levin turned away from the glass, eyes dark. "Get that field trip roster," he said to Clara, voice sharp with new urgency. "And find out everything you can about this Mr. Bell outside. The town of Kingston Hollow woke to a rumor that would soon become national news. But for now, in interview room C, the past had come calling, and no one knew what it wanted." Crescent Hill Elementary was dressed for Halloween that Friday in 1994. Construction paper bats in the windows, jack-o'-lanterns lining the office counter, the smell of crayons and paste thick in the air. In Ms. Carey's 3B, kids fidgeted in costumes. A pirate, a princess, a homemade robot with tinfoil arms, and 3 ghosts in sheets that kept tripping over their own feet. Hannah Griggs wore yellow, always yellow. That morning she'd pressed the sleeves of her favorite hoodie straight, pinning on the name tag her mother had written for her in blue marker. Her hands trembled as she waited by her desk, clutching the permission slip like a talisman. Excited for your first big field trip, Hannah? Ms. Carey had asked, her smile gentle. Hannah only nodded, too shy for words, and watched the clock tick closer to departure. Leon Wynne, with his chipped front tooth and endless energy, tried to balance pencils on his upper lip, making Benji Krell giggle so hard he snorted. Outside, the bus engine rattled and belched black smoke. Chaperones counted heads, checked lists, called out names over the chatter. "Let's go, 3B!" Ms. Carey cheered, waving her clipboard. History in the making. The bus itself was ancient, its seats patched with duct tape, windows stuck half open to the autumn chill. Kids jostled for spots, trading lunch snacks, peering out at the golden, leaf-littered woods. Miles Heller, back then a newly minted teacher with nerves and hope, was assigned the last row. He remembered the smell of peanut butter and plastic, the nervous excitement, contagious as laughter, the hush that fell as the bus turned off the main road and climbed the rough, winding path toward Worcester Asylum. The building appeared suddenly, stone and iron, half swallowed by brambles and time. Its windows, dark and blind, stared back at the children like the sockets of a skull. A man was waiting by the gate. He was tall and slender, dressed in a faded tweed coat, a burgundy bow tie askew at his throat. His hair was slicked flat and graying at the temples, his smile wide but stiff, as if unused to stretching. He introduced himself as Mr. Bell, your guide today. No one questioned how he knew the names of every child as they lined up. "Welcome, Ms. Carey's 3B. This way, please." The tour started in the main lobby, under the cracked glass dome. Mr. Bell spoke softly, his voice carrying even in the echoing halls. Dr. Reese Wister founded this place in 1904. He believed that memory was everything. If you take away a person's memories, do you take away the person or just the pain? Benji snorted, whispering, "I'd like to forget about homework. Is that allowed?" Leon grinned, nudging him. "Bet you'd forget your name, dummy." Hannah stayed near the back, eyes darting from Mr. Bell to the shadowy corners of each room. Miles watched his class closely, noting which kids lingered by the windows, which clung to their chaperones, which scribbled quick notes on the souvenir notepads the school had given them. The asylum was full of smells. Mildew, old medicine, rotting paper. In the dining hall, a single wooden chair sat in the center, surrounded by dust. Mr. Bell stopped, gesturing to it. This is where Dr. Wister practiced his memory discipline, a form of therapy that asked children to sit very still and try to forget what frightened them most. The children grew quieter. Ms. Carey's smile faded a little, and even the adults shuffled, uneasy. Miles glanced at a taped-off hallway. The doorway marked "Staff Only" in peeling paint and police tape. He saw Hannah staring at it, her fingers twisting in the hem of her hoodie. Lunch was in the courtyard. Sandwiches, apples, juice boxes. Kids sprawling on the patchy grass, comparing Halloween plans. Miles sat with the chaperones, marking off the attendance list. Hannah, Leon, Benji, all present after lunch, all accounted for. But something in the air felt heavier, as if a storm was about to break. The last part of the tour was the old children's wing. Mr. Bell led them down a corridor where the floorboards creaked and the wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. "Please stay together," he said. "There are rules here, you see. This is an old building and it remembers everything." At some point, while Mr. Bell recounted the legend of a haunted stairwell, Miles realized Hannah, Leon, and Benji were gone. Panic bloomed. Teachers called for them, voices ricocheting off stone. The tour group scattered, searching rooms, closets, even the grounds. Miles heard the scream, a sharp, inhuman sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The rest was chaos. Doors opening and closing by themselves, children crying. Mr. Bell standing by the staff-only hall, watching, his eyes fixed on the locked stairwell. By the time police arrived, night was falling. The woods swallowed the sounds of the search. Dogs sniffed every trail, volunteers combed every inch of ground, and the building itself seemed to grow colder, more silent. No sign of struggle, no bodies, no answers. When the bus rolled away hours later, 3 seats were empty, and Mr. Bell was gone. Night in Kingston Hollow crept in early that autumn. Dark by 5, the streets empty, porch lights flickering as if the houses themselves were afraid. Inside his cabin, Miles Heller wandered through a fog of old paperwork and new dread. He could not sleep. He could not eat. When he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of the missing children. Hannah, with her shy half-smile and pale hair. Leon, always laughing. Benji, fiercely protective of them both. Their images lingered at the edges of his vision, persistent as the sound of rain on his roof. He dragged a battered storage box from the back of his closet, its cardboard sides sagging with age. Inside, the wreckage of a life in education, lesson plans scribbled with red pen, certificates, faded flyers for talent shows and PTA meetings. At the very bottom, he found the 1994 yearbook, Crescent Hill Elementary, embossed in gold on the cover. He turned the pages slowly. There was Ms. Carey's 3B class, spread across page 38. Leon Wynn, all mischief and missing tooth. Benji Krell, head down, eyes darting. Hannah Griggs, clutching a book far too large for her hands, as if it could shield her from the world. He paused at the chaperone photo, a snapshot in front of the school bus, adults clustered awkwardly behind the children. There he was, Miles, looking younger than he felt even then, hair thick, smile wide, a hopeful gleam in his eye. But even in the familiar faces, something felt wrong. He ran a finger along the edge of the photograph, tracing the children in the back row. There, in the far right corner, a boy with a red backpack, eyes wide and wary. Not Benji, not Leon, not any child he could name. The boy wasn't listed in the roll call. There was no signature on a permission slip, no entry on Ms. Carey's attendance sheet. Was it a trick of the light? A stranger's child who'd wandered into the photo? Or a memory too stubborn to die? Miles set the photo aside, hands trembling. He dug deeper, pulling out a box marked Field Trip. Inside, a crumpled permission slip for Hannah, written in her mother's neat, looping script. A Polaroid of Leon and Benji sword-fighting with sticks. A lunch menu for the day: peanut butter and jelly, apple slices, carrot sticks, milk. At the very bottom, pressed between stacks of worksheets and class newsletters, he found a small construction paper rectangle. Construction paper rectangle. Memory wall. Room 3B. It was a project they'd done together, weeks before the trip. Each student had written their favorite memory and pinned it to the bulletin board. Hannah's was reading with Mom. Benji's was fishing with Grandpa. Leon's was making everyone laugh. Miles read each one, the weight of guilt growing with every card. They were memories he could see and touch, but they couldn't bring the children back. He set the memory wall on his desk and slumped in his chair, head in his hands. The wind rattled the window panes. Somewhere in the woods, an owl called out, long and mournful. Suddenly, a new memory surfaced, jagged and bright. He remembered the morning of the field trip, taking attendance. Hannah, Leon, Benji, and someone else. A boy who answered only when Miles called a name that wasn't on the list. Every time Miles tried to recall the name, it slipped away, like a dream on awaking. He shuddered, heart pounding. He was losing himself in the past, and the past was losing its grip on reality. The phone rang. He let it ring twice, 3 times, before answering. It was Sheriff Levin. His voice was heavy, words careful. "Miles, you remember the memory wall? That box you made with your class?" Miles swallowed hard. "I'm looking at it now. There's something you need to see." Clara found an old envelope addressed to you in the station's evidence locker. It's from Benji's mother. She says she gave it to you by mistake after he disappeared. Miles' hands shook as he opened the envelope. Inside, pressed between two slips of paper, was a baby tooth, milky white, perfectly preserved. The letter read, "Dear Mr. Heller, I found this in Benji's desk after. He said it was lucky. I can't bear to keep it. Maybe it'll help bring him home. Mrs. Krell." Miles stared at the tooth in his palm, a chill running down his spine. Why had he never noticed it before? Why did it feel so important now? He set it on the memory wall and whispered, "I'm sorry, Benji. I should have looked harder." The silence in the cabin felt deeper than ever. The woods outside pressed close, as if listening. Somewhere miles away, a little girl in a yellow hoodie dreamed of a place with no time, no sun, and no way out. The memory came to Miles as if he'd slipped into it by accident. A waking dream, or a nightmare that never quite faded with the dawn. Sometimes, the smell of wet stone and musty books could take him back. Other times, it was the shriek of a crow outside his window. But tonight, it was the silence that brought it all rushing back. He remembered the way the bus wheels crackled over gravel, the engine sputtering as they pulled to a stop at the gates of Worcester Asylum. The building rose above them, imposing and vine-choked, its windows blind with dust. Mr. Bell was waiting for them at the entrance. The man's smile was thin as wire, his eyes too bright. He held a clipboard and wore a tweed coat with a patch at the elbow. A man who could have been plucked from another era. "Welcome, children," Mr. Bell had intoned. "You stand at the threshold of history, where memory lives and dies." The foyer was dim, glass dome spider-webbed with cracks. The air inside was different, thicker, older, full of secrets. The group shuffled in, sneakers squeaking on worn linoleum. Miles trailed behind, keeping an eye on the stragglers. Hannah with her head down, Benji snapping photos on a disposable camera, Leon whispering ghost stories to anyone who'd listen. Mr. Bell led them through the halls, pausing before a locked metal door covered in faded tape. "Dr. Reese Worcester," he explained, "believed memory was the essence of personhood. He conducted experiments here, memory discipline they called it. Some say he succeeded too well." Benji nudged Leon and made a face. "Bet he could make you forget how much you love attention." Leon shot back, "Bet he could make you forget your own name." The class giggled, but Hannah looked away, shivering. Miles noticed her and drifted closer. "Doing okay, Hannah?" he asked softly. She shrugged, eyes fixed on the peeling wallpaper. "It feels wrong here, like the walls are watching." Miles almost laughed, but thought better of it. "Stay close to the group, all right?" They passed old offices where faded patient charts lined the walls. Mr. Bell's stories grew darker. Kids left behind, doctors who vanished, corridors sealed for safety. In the children's ward, a set of double doors led to a stairwell roped off with police tape. The sign said "Staff Only" in stenciled letters, and the doorknob gleamed, recently cleaned. Hannah stopped. She stared at the stairwell with wide, glassy eyes. Miles started to say something when Mr. Bell appeared at his shoulder. "Best not to linger near closed doors," he murmured, so softly only Miles could hear. "Sometimes the past leaks through." The group moved on, but Miles kept glancing over his shoulder at the locked stairwell, unease gnawing at him. The hum of hospital machinery faded into the background, replaced by the quiet tick of a wall clock and the gentle rustle of curtains. Miles Heller sat in the visitor's chair, his hands folded tight in his lap. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, making the whitewashed room feel even colder. Hannah Griggs sat cross-legged on her bed, knees hugged to her chest, her yellow hoodie now folded neatly at her side. For all the world, she looked like any other 12-year-old, except for the stillness in her posture, the unblinking gaze that tracked dust motes swirling in the sunbeam by the window. Miles cleared his throat. "Do you remember me, Hannah?" She looked up, her face pale, eyes shining with some emotion he couldn't read. "You're older," she said, as if it were the only thing that mattered. He managed a tight, sad smile. "Time does that to some of us." She didn't respond to the joke. Instead, she looked away, picking at the edge of her hospital blanket with nervous fingers. Miles tried again. "Can you tell me where you've been, Hannah? All this time?" She hesitated, lips pressed thin. "It wasn't time," she said, voice distant. "It was just held. Like holding your breath underwater, waiting to come up, but the surface keeps moving." The words chilled him, more than he wanted to admit. Held by what? She shook her head. "Not by a thing, by a rule. The Hollow isn't a place, Mr. Heller. It's a rule." He frowned, heart thudding. "What kind of rule?" She looked at him, and he saw the shadow of fear ripple through her. "If you go far enough down, you stop being found. That's how the Hollow works. If you forget too much, you become part of it, like a shadow on the wall." He tried to steady his voice. "You're not a shadow, Hannah. You're here." She met his eyes, and for the first time, he saw tears there, tears that never fell, caught in the corners of her lashes. "I came back because I remembered my name. That's how you find the light, but not everyone remembers. Some just become the rule." A heavy silence fell. Miles wanted to reach for her hand, but hesitated, afraid of shattering her fragile calm. After a moment, Hannah said, "You left us. That day, at the stairs. You saw me. You turned away." The guilt washed over him, crushing and complete. "Hannah, I was scared. I didn't know what to do. I should have tried harder. I'm so sorry." She studied him for a long moment, then shrugged. A gesture too old for her small frame. "It's not your fault. The Hollow was already hungry." He felt a chill as if the room's temperature had dropped. "Did you see Leon or Benji?" Hannah's mouth trembled. "Benji ran. The room changed. He didn't get out in time. Leon's still there, but not all of him." Miles shivered. Are they alive?" She shook her head. "Not the way you think. The Hollow takes pieces. If you remember enough, you can leave. If you forget, you're lost." A nurse entered then, breaking the spell. "Visiting hours are almost over, Mr. Heller." He stood slowly, every joint protesting. "I'll come back tomorrow, Hannah. I promise." She nodded, curling tighter into herself. As he left, he heard her whisper, almost too soft to catch. "Remember your name, Mr. Heller. It's the only way out." Miles stepped into the hallway, heart pounding. He wondered how many memories he still had left to lose. The county records office was housed in a squat brick building that smelled of mildew and yellowing paper, tucked behind the courthouse like an afterthought. Clara Mendez parked her cruiser in a narrow slot and nodded for Miles to follow. He shuffled in silence, gaze haunted, his jacket collar turned up against the morning chill. Inside, a fluorescent hum filled the lobby. Boxes lined every wall, land deeds, old birth records, grainy microfilm of town meetings going back a century. Behind a battered desk, a clerk with watery blue eyes and nicotine-stained fingers sorted through envelopes. Clara flashed her badge. "We need blueprints and documents for the Worcester Asylum site, original and renovation plans, anything from before 2004. The clerk barely glanced up. "All those files were sealed in '95, by court order." Clara frowned. "Whose court?" The clerk hesitated, tapping ash into a coffee mug. "That's sealed too. Higher than my pay grade. If you want access, you'll need to file a formal petition. Takes a few weeks." Miles stepped forward, voice unsteady but urgent. "Please, 3 children vanished there. Hannah Griggs just reappeared and she hasn't aged a day. There's something wrong with that place. We have to see the files." The clerk's eyes flickered, a hint of recognition or maybe fear. He slid a visitor log across the counter. This is public. Last entry for the asylum records. Look for yourself. Clara turned the logbook toward her. The last signature, in spidery handwriting. Dr. Ansel Reese. February 14th, 1996. Miles's heart thudded. He pointed at the name. He was the tour guide. Mr. Bell, that's him. But he shouldn't have been here. He was never on staff. The clerk shrugged, lowering his gaze. He signed in. That's all I know. Some of the old staff said he used to come and go, even after the asylum closed. Clara flipped through the log, scanning other names. No one else familiar. She scribbled Doctor. Reese's name into her notepad. Any chance you've got blueprints that aren't sealed? Maintenance maps, utility records, anything at all? The clerk thought a moment, then fished through a drawer, producing a single, faded copy. Just this. It's old. Most of the new plans were pulled, but there's a note here. Says, basement and sub-levels not included per request. Heiress. Miles felt a chill in his bones. He wanted those areas hidden. Clara tucked the blueprint into her bag. Thank you. As they turned to leave, the clerk called after them, voice barely above a whisper. You be careful. Folks who dig too deep into Worcester never come back the same. Out in the parking lot, the rain had started. A cold, needling drizzle. Miles stared at the name in his notebook, mind spinning. Dr. Ansel Reese, he said. He's the key. He's always been the key. Clara checked her phone. No new messages from the sheriff, but a notification from the FBI. Dr. Reese. Age unknown. No confirmed death. Last sighted at a private research center in California. Photo attached. She clicked it open. The image was black and white, dated 1962. The face was unmistakable. Tall, thin, eyes bright and hollow, bow tie crooked at the neck. Miles stared. He hasn't aged either. Clara met his gaze, resolve hardening in her expression. We're not dealing with anything normal, are we? Miles shook his head, the wind whipping cold across the lot. No, he said softly. We never were. The land where Worcester Asylum had once stood was now little more than a clearing in the woods. After the building's demolition in 2004, the trees had crept closer, reclaiming what was theirs. Blackberry brambles knotted around the half-buried stones. Rain pooled in the footprint of the old foundation, black and still as oil. Clara parked the cruiser on the shoulder of a gravel road. The late afternoon was gray, the forest floor slick with autumn rot. Miles followed her with an old flashlight in one hand, blueprint clutched in the other. They stood in silence, listening, the wind rattling through branches, crows calling overhead, the ground sucking at their boots. This is it, Clara said, checking her phone for GPS. The main entrance was here. Miles ran his hand along a low wall, moss softened and cold. He remembered walking children through that very door. Remembered Hannah's hand in his, the sunlight bright on her hair. He shivered. Let's see if anything from the sub-levels is still accessible, Clara said, squinting at the blueprint. Look for a service hatch or stairwell marked staff only. They worked their way around the perimeter, pushing through tall grass and tangles of briar. The trees here grew in odd clusters. Some bent away from the ruins as if leaning from a sickness. Others rooted deep and twisted in the old foundation itself. Finally, behind a collapsed archway, Clara spotted a rusted iron hatch half hidden under a tumble of stones. Heavy chains looped through the handles, the padlock crusted with age. Help me clear this, she said, bracing her shoulder against a stone. Together they pried the debris away until the hatch was fully exposed. Clara produced a bolt cutter from the trunk. You learned to come prepared in this line of work, and with a grunt, snapped the chain. The hatch shrieked as they levered it open. Cold air surged up from below, carrying a smell of mildew and old iron. Miles flashed his light down. A narrow crawl space extended into darkness, lined with shattered tiles and, strangest of all, mirrored panels. The glass was fogged and warped, many pieces cracked or missing, but as Miles moved the beam, he caught a dozen reflections. Himself, Clara, the tangle of branches above. But in some panels, the reflections seemed off. Shadows stretched too long, faces blurred, eyes looking back with unfamiliar sadness. Clara took a steadying breath. "You ready?" Miles nodded, heart pounding. "Let's go." The crawl space was tight, the ceiling barely high enough to crouch. Their footsteps echoed, every scrape and breath magnified. The mirrors caught and multiplied their movements, making it feel as if they were being followed by dozens of doppelgangers. Halfway in, Miles caught his own reflection as it was in 1994. Dark hair, fear in his eyes, shoulders squared against the unknown. He stumbled, shaking it off. But the memory stuck. At the end of the passage, they found a heavy, metal-plated door set at an odd angle, neither straight down nor across, as if the very geometry of the building had been warped. There was no handle, just a square steel plate smeared with what looked like old fingerprints. Stenciled in black, barely visible through grime. Room 0. Miles froze. This was the place Mr. Bell kept talking about. Clara pressed her palm against the plate. It was ice cold. Nothing happened at first. Then, with a grinding, reluctant groan, the door swung inward. Beyond was blackness, cold and absolute. From somewhere inside, a girl's voice, so faint it could have been memory or the wind, whispered, "Don't let it know your name." Miles' heart thudded. Clara met his eyes, flashlight trembling in her hand. "After you," she whispered, half a joke, half a prayer. Together they stepped inside. The first thing they noticed was the cold. The temperature plummeted as the door groaned open, their breath fogging in the beam of Clara's flashlight. Miles felt the air tighten around him, heavy, charged, and electric, as if the room itself was holding its breath. The flashlight beam jittered along the walls, and Miles saw that they were not bare. Every inch of the padded canvas was scorched with dark, childish shapes. Drawings, hundreds of them, burned into the fabric as if someone had taken a lighter to the walls over and over. They depicted children's faces, some with mouths twisted in fear, others blurred as if half erased by flame. Most had no eyes. Some seemed to be reaching out, arms stretched in frantic silhouettes. Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Who did this?" Miles shook his head, unable to speak. His stomach twisted as he stepped further into the room. The light trembled over one drawing larger than the rest. A perfect rendering of himself, clipboard in hand, standing in front of a heavy door. This very door. In the center of the room, a bulb dangled from a frayed cord. It glowed with a sickly yellow light, the only warmth in the place. But it did nothing to chase away the cold. On the floor beneath it lay a scattering of old toys, blocks, a battered doll, a plastic ring stack, each one scorched, melted, or broken in some way. Miles knelt to examine the floor and noticed deep scratches gouged into the wooden boards, as if someone had tried to claw their way out. Near the far wall, a chunk of the floor had been pried up and hastily replaced. Clara, her eyes darting, found a small, battered table in the corner, half buried under a pile of singed books. On top was a leather-bound notebook, initials embossed in gold. A.R. She picked it up with trembling hands, flipping through brittle, singed pages. The writing was erratic, ink faded and looping. The child's mind is malleable, but it is not memory that shapes it. It is absence. Remove enough context, and you do not get ignorance. You get hollow. Leon is promising. The others are weak. Hannah sees, but does not respond. Benji hides. I will begin separation in stages. Clara read aloud, voice hollow. He was experimenting on them before they vanished. Miles shook his head, a sick certainty rising. Number after. He kept them here. He looked up at the walls again. The faces, the endless procession of reaching hands and empty eyes. One of the burned drawings, a small, hunched figure, clutched something to its chest. A book, too large for its hands. Miles shivered. That's Hannah. Clara's light swept the floor again. She knelt and pried at the loose board. With effort, she lifted it, revealing a narrow cavity beneath. There, tucked away in the dust, was a second, smaller journal, its cover stained with what might have been blood. She opened it carefully. Pages and pages of frantic notes, most of them illegible. But one phrase, written over and over, stood out. Remember your name. Remember your name. Remember your name. Clara closed the notebook, her hands shaking. He wasn't just keeping them. He was trying to erase them. Suddenly the bulb overhead flickered. Miles thought he heard something. A child's voice, singing softly, the melody familiar but distorted. He strained to listen, heart racing, but the song faded, replaced by the endless whisper of the hollow. He looked at Clara, her face pale in the sickly light. We need to keep going. She nodded, tucking the notebooks into her bag. As they turned to leave, the bulb sputtered, and in that moment of darkness, Miles thought he saw movement. A flash of a child's face in the corner, mouth open in a silent scream, then gone. He stumbled back, pulse hammering. Clara caught his arm. You saw it too. He nodded. The cold was deeper now, a living thing. They stepped back into the crawl space, the door to room 0 closing behind them with a final, echoing thud. And somewhere, deeper below, something waited. Back in Clara's car, rain rattled hard against the windshield, drumming out the silence that stretched between her and Miles. The notebooks they'd found lay between them on the dash, old paper fragrant with mold and something sharper, fear, maybe, or the scent of lost time. Clara turned the key but didn't drive. She just stared at the gold initials, AR, as if the leather might burn her hand. Read it again, she said, slowly this time. Miles nodded, opening the larger of the two notebooks. The handwriting inside started neat, but quickly unraveled. Lines wavering, ink blotting in places as though written with a shaking hand. He read aloud. The child's mind is clay, but it is absence that sculpts it, not memory. Remove the context, erase the roots, and you do not get ignorance. You get hollow. Leon is promising. He splits easily, comes back easily. The others are weak. Hannah sees, but she does not respond to the rules. Benji hides. I will begin separation in stages. Clara shivered. He was experimenting on them like lab rats. Not with pain, with forgetting. Miles paged deeper, finding sketches. Floor plans of the asylum, diagrams of the crawl space, crude drawings of a door marked Room 0. More rambling text, fragments of a mind untethered. Benji ran. The room changed. The door did not open. He was left behind the wall. I marked his tooth for the next attempt. Clara's eyes widened. His tooth? Is that the one Benji's mother gave you, that she said was lucky? Miles nodded, reaching for the envelope. He placed the small tooth on his palm, as if weighing the memory. He says here, Clara said, pointing, the tooth is a key for the door. But which door? There was nothing but that cold room, those drawings and... She stopped as Miles turned a page, revealing a series of numbers, crudely scratched in a spiraling circle around a single phrase. The hollow keeps what it takes, but the name is the door. Miles looked at Clara, the air thick with dread. He didn't just make them forget who they were. He tried to make them forget how to be found. If you lose your name, you lose yourself. You can't ever leave. Clara closed her eyes, fighting tears of anger and frustration. He was erasing them, one memory at a time. She flipped open the smaller journal, the one found beneath the floorboards. Most of it was unreadable, scrawled with symbols, pages torn out, words written backward and forward. But one page stood out, repeated over and over in a child's hand. Remember your name. Remember your name. Remember your name. Miles' voice broke. Hannah did. That's why she came back. But Leon, Benji. They sat in silence, the rain pounding, the world suddenly very small and very haunted. After a long moment, Clara pulled herself together. There's something else we need to check. The police evidence room, old case files, anything left from '94 and after. Maybe there's something the original investigation missed. Miles agreed, tucking the tooth into a small plastic evidence bag. They drove through rain-streaked streets back to the Kingston Hollow Sheriff's Station, slipping through the empty lobby to the basement where decades of unsolved cases slumbered in dusty boxes. Clara unlocked the door, flicking on the bare bulb overhead. The air was stale, thick with mildew and memories. They found the box labeled Worcester Asylum, 1994 to 1997. Inside, photocopies of field trip slips, a scrap of yellow fabric, part of a hoodie, a class roster with Hannah, Leon, Benji circled in red, a battered VHS tape labeled Worcester Survey, 1995. Clara slid the tape from its sleeve, glancing at Miles. You ready? He nodded. I need to know what happened. They brought the tape to the break room, where an old TV and VCR still lingered, relics from before everything went digital. The tape hissed, static rolling across the screen. For several long minutes, nothing but white snow and the low drone of tape tracking. Then, abruptly, an image. A child sitting in a chair, eyes covered, head lowered. A chalkboard at his feet. W3, LW, Leon Wynn. He was mouthing words, silent, his lips barely moving, expression empty. Suddenly, Leon looked up, directly at the camera. His face was blank. His eyes were vast and hollow. The tape skipped. For a split second, a dark shape flickered past in the background, gone before Miles could process what it was. Then the image vanished, replaced by static. Clara ejected the tape, face pale. They were using the asylum after it closed, recording them, testing them. Miles stared at the silent screen, feeling the world shift under his feet. Or living in it, or something worse. They sat in silence, the only sound the rain outside and the whisper of old tape rolling back into its shell. Miles looked at Clara, voice trembling. If names are keys, then Leon and Benji might still be there, trapped behind the wall. Clara nodded, her resolve hardening. Then that's where we're going next. Clara and Miles left the sheriff's station in silence, the heavy old VCR tape and the two strange journals echoing in their minds. It was past midnight when they drove north toward the clearing, the headlights picking out ribbons of fog that spilled across the road. In the passenger seat, Miles held Benji's tooth in his palm like a fragile relic, some lost piece of a world that never quite let go. The woods were different at night. The clearing where the asylum once stood was a black mouth in the landscape, swallowing the light from Clara's flashlight. A hush lay over everything, so deep that even the rain seemed to stop as they stepped out. Miles paused, listening. He imagined the echoes of children running, laughing, the memory too real for comfort. He could hear his own voice from decades ago, calling names into the cold autumn air. Hannah, Leon, Benji, come back now. Field trip's over. They walked together to the rusted hatch, the wind rattling branches overhead. The crawl space was still open, the scent of wet stone stronger than ever, the mirrored panels slick with condensation. Clara knelt, bracing herself, and crawled in first. Miles followed, breath catching as the air closed around him. Their flashlights caught their own faces, sometimes as they were now, sometimes impossibly young, sometimes blurred and distorted, as if memory itself refused to settle. Every few feet, the crawl space seemed to bend, angles shifting, the ceiling rising, then dipping, sometimes impossibly far from what the blueprints should allow. Sometimes Miles heard footsteps behind them, too slow and heavy to belong to either of them. It was Clara who first saw the break in the mirrored wall, a jagged edge, behind which a hand-dug tunnel yawned, lined with more mirrors, each more warped than the last. Some reflected only shadow. They squeezed through the opening, Miles's heart pounding. Inside, the tunnel twisted in on itself. Old wiring snaked along the floor, their feet sometimes crunching over broken glass or splintered wood. The air buzzed with static, the faintest electric hum vibrating in their teeth. As they walked, a faint voice echoed from hidden speakers, playing in a loop. Remember your number. Forget your face. The hollow takes those who look too long. The words seemed to grow louder the deeper they went, seeping into bone, into thought. Miles felt his own memories flickering. Images of the school bus, his mother's kitchen, Hannah's shy smile, each one growing harder to hold. Keep your name in your head, he whispered to Clara. Don't let go of it. At the end of the tunnel stood a steel door, seamless, marked by a single narrow slot at its center, the size and shape of a tooth. Clara drew a shaking breath. The key, she murmured. Miles handed her the tiny tooth, his hands trembling. She pressed it into the slot, and for a moment nothing happened. Then the door clicked, the sound echoing like a gunshot. With a groan, it swung open, revealing a blinding white light. They stepped through together. Inside was a room that seemed to have no corners, no ceiling, just endless white, softly glowing, the boundaries shifting if you looked too hard. In the center, a boy stood with his back to them, shoulders hunched. Miles recognized him at once. Leon, still 12, unchanged but somehow wrong, the color washed out of his hair, his skin pale as paper. He turned slowly, his eyes unfocused, mouth opening as if to speak, but no sound came. Clara whispered, "Leon?" The boy blinked, uncertain. "Do I know you?" Miles stepped forward, his throat raw. "It's me, Leon, Mr. Heller, from school." The boy stared at him, puzzled. "That's not my name. They took it. They left me the rest." Miles' heart broke. He knelt down, careful not to startle him. "Who took it?" Leon pointed at the far wall, his arm trembling. The surface flickered, shifting between 100 burned-in faces, children's faces, over and over, their features smeared, erased. In every version, Benji's mouth was missing. Miles' vision swam. "Where's Benji, Leon?" The boy looked down. "Behind the second wall. He got too loud. They took his name too." Clara stepped closer. "Can you come with us, Leon?" "Can you remember your name?" He shook his head, misery plain on his face. "It's not enough. I need something to hold. Something true." Miles searched his pockets, desperate. His fingers found the battered old yearbook photo. The class of 3B, all names written in Miss Carey's careful hand. He pressed the photo into Leon's hand. "This is you, Leon Wynn. That's your name. That's who you are." The boy stared at it, eyes wide, and for a moment, color bled back into his cheeks. The room shuddered, the walls flickering, the endless white shifting to gray. A door appeared in the far wall, swinging open without a sound. And through it stepped a tall man in a faded bow tie, hair slicked back, eyes ancient and sad. Dr. Reese, Mr. Bell. He regarded Miles with something like pity. "You finally remembered where you left them," he said. Clara stepped in front of Leon, gun drawn. "Who are you?" Reese shook his head. "Not who. When. I have always been here, one way or another. He turned to Leon, hand outstretched. This child is what we tried to become. Unmoored. Free from time, from being found. He is hollow and whole at once. Miles' anger rose. You did this to them, to all of them. I offered them escape, Reese replied, his voice mournful. From pain, from loss, from the burden of time. Most grown-ups would choose it if they could. He looked at Miles, eyes soft. And you were the last checkmark. You signed the permission slip, Mr. Heller. You let me in. Clara's hand tightened on her weapon. Let him go. Reese smiled, sad and resigned. You cannot keep what is already gone. He moved toward Leon, but Miles stepped between them, holding out the yearbook photo like a shield. No more. You can't take him. He has a name. He's real. Reese regarded the photo, his face twisting with a flicker of pain. The world shifted. The walls warped and the room became impossibly huge, then impossibly small. Mirrors blooming from the whiteness, each one reflecting a different version of the same moment. Leon laughing, Benji running, Hannah crying by the stairwell. Reese seemed to flicker, his form blurring, voice echoing from everywhere at once. You're not real. Not here. Not anymore. Miles pressed the photo into Leon's chest. You are Leon Wynn. You get to leave now. Leon's eyes widened, filling with tears, and the room screamed. A sound of splitting, shattering glass, endless and sharp. Suddenly the white light collapsed. The world spun, dumping them onto cracked concrete and moss. Clara and Miles blinked in the morning sun. Leon was beside them, dazed but breathing, clutching the yearbook photo. The foundation of Wister Asylum was all that remained, just black stone and weeds. Clara hugged Leon tight, whispering his name over and over. Hannah stood at the edge of the clearing, sunlight glancing off her pale hair. She smiled. A small, bittersweet smile. He found the way back, she said. You reminded him. Miles stumbled to his feet. What about Benji? Hannah's eyes clouded. Not all the way. Some doors only open once. Clara knelt in front of Leon. You're safe. You're real. We're here. The air was heavy with loss, but something had lifted. A weight that no one had realized they'd carried. The woods felt lighter, the clearing not quite so haunted. Miles turned to thank Hannah, but she was already walking away, barefoot into the trees, her yellow hoodie a banner against the green. He watched her vanish, the forest closing behind her. Is it over? He asked softly. Clara nodded. For us. Maybe not for everyone. Miles breathed the scent of moss and rain and old stone, let it fill his lungs. He felt old, exhausted, but lighter, like he had set something down. They led Leon to the car, the sun finally rising in the east, golden light spilling across the ruined earth. In the weeks that followed, Kingston Hollow buzzed with rumors. People whispered about the missing and the found, about haunted woods and miracles, about a teacher's guilt and a girl who came back unchanged. Miles Heller went back to his little house at the edge of the woods. He took the yearbook and the burned canvas from room 0, put them in a drawer with his other regrets. He started teaching again at the community center, art classes for kids who'd seen too much. Sometimes he caught himself whispering the names of his old students, just to hear them aloud. Clara Mendez was promoted. Her name splashed across the news for her tenacity and compassion. But every autumn, she walked the path behind the old asylum site, breathing in the sharp cold, listening for echoes. Leon Wynn was fostered by a family on the next ridge. He didn't talk much for a long while, but he drew pictures of rooms with too many corners, of mirrors that reflected only shadows, of children whose names he wrote in careful block letters, never in color. Hannah Griggs was never seen again. Sometimes, though, children said they glimpsed a girl in yellow at the edge of the woods, watching. And as for Dr. Reese, some said that on foggy evenings, A tall man in a bow tie could be seen standing at the edge of suburban schoolyards, silent, waiting. The hollow, they said, wasn't a place. It was a rule, a wound. And wounds, after all, remember.